You planted your cucumbers a week or two ago. They survived the transplant, they look okay, and maybe you're already seeing a little new growth. And right about now, that little gardener voice kicks in and says, should I feed them? Should I push them a little? Should I give them something so they take off faster? That is exactly where a lot of cucumber problems begin. Feed too early, and you can stress the roots. Mix the fertilizer too strong, and you can burn a young plant. Give the wrong thing at the wrong time, and instead of getting flowers and cucumbers, you may end up with a big leafy vine that takes forever to produce. So today, let's talk about the first feeding after you transplant cucumbers. When to do it, how to know the plant is ready, what you can use, and what you should definitely avoid. The main thing to understand is this. After transplanting, cucumbers do not need to be rushed. They have tender roots, and for the first several days, the plant is not focused on exploding with new growth. It is trying to settle in, recover, and start working in the new soil. That is especially true if you garden in a cooler part of the country, like the upper Midwest, New England, the Pacific Northwest, or anywhere with cold spring nights. Cucumbers love warm soil. If the soil is still chilly, the roots will not be very active, even if the air feels warm during the day. And in hot southern areas like Texas, Georgia, Florida, or parts of the Southwest, the problem can be the opposite. The plant may be dealing with heat, dry wind, or strong sun right after planting. That is still stress. So the first rule is simple. With cucumbers, it is usually better to feed a little late than too early. So when should you give the first feeding? In most home gardens, the first feeding comes about 10 to 14 days after transplanting. But do not treat the calendar like a law. Treat it like a clue. If 2 weeks have passed and the plant is still just sitting there with no new leaves, no stronger stem, and no sign of vine growth, it is not ready yet. Maybe the soil is too cold. Maybe the bed is too wet. Maybe the plant is still recovering from transplant shock. In that situation, fertilizer is usually not the fix. But if the cucumber has started to grow, if you see fresh new leaves, a stronger stem, little tendrils, or the beginning of a vine, then yes, you can give it a gentle first feeding. Here is how to know your cucumber is ready. First, look for new leaves. Not the leaves it had when you bought it or started it indoors, but brand new leaves that appeared after transplanting. That tells you the plant is active. Second, look at the stem. Is the plant standing stronger than it did on planting day? Does it look more settled and less droopy? That is a good sign. Third, look for tendrils or vine growth. When cucumbers start reaching and stretching, they are usually ready to take up more nutrients. If you see those signs, you can feed. If you do not see any real growth yet, give it a few more days and check the basics first. Warm soil, steady moisture, and good drainage matter more than fertilizer at this stage. Now let's talk about what to feed with. Option 1. Wood ash tea. Wood ash can be useful, but it is not something I would tell every gardener in America to use automatically. It depends heavily on your soil. Wood ash adds potassium and calcium, and it can raise soil pH. That means if your soil is already alkaline, you need to be careful. This is very common in parts of the West, the Southwest, the Great Plains, and in areas with hard irrigation water. If your soil pH is already high, wood ash can make things worse. But if your soil is not alkaline and you want a mild potassium boost without adding a lot of nitrogen, wood ash tea can work. Use clean hardwood ash only. Do not use ash from treated lumber, painted wood, plywood, glossy paper, or charcoal briquettes. A simple mix is 1 cup of sifted hardwood ash in about 2.5 gallons of water. Stir it well and let it sit for a day. Before watering, stir again. Apply it to moist soil, not dry soil. For a young cucumber plant, use about 2 to 4 cups around the root zone, depending on the size of the plant. What does wood ash give the plant? Mostly potassium, along with calcium, magnesium, and a little phosphorus. Potassium helps with strong growth and future fruiting. But remember, wood ash is not a complete fertilizer. It is not something you use just because you heard cucumbers like it. Use it only when your soil makes sense for it. Option 2. Weed tea or green plant tea. If you have lots of weeds or fresh grass clippings, you can turn some of that green material into a mild liquid feed. Take a bucket, fill it about halfway with green material, and add water almost to the top. Nettles are great if you have them. You can also use dandelion leaves, lamb's quarters, soft young weeds, or untreated grass clippings. Try not to use weeds that already have mature seed heads. Cover the bucket loosely so gases can escape, and let it sit in a warm spot for about a week. It will smell strong, so do not keep it right next to the patio or the back door. Before using it, dilute it well. A safe beginner mix is 1 part strained weed tea to 10 parts water. Then water around the cucumber plant on already moist soil. This kind of tea gives a mild nitrogen boost, along with some potassium and trace nutrients. It can be helpful when the cucumber needs to build leaves and vines. But do not assume that organic means impossible to overdo. You can still overfeed with homemade plant tea. Keep it diluted, use it gently, and watch how the plant responds. Option 3. Compost tea or composted cow manure tea. In the United States, I would be careful with the word manure, especially around food crops. Fresh manure is not something you want splashing around your cucumber plants. It can burn roots, and it can also create food safety concerns. If you use manure, use properly composted manure. Bagged composted cow manure from a garden center is usually a safer and easier choice for home gardeners than fresh manure from a farm. To make a mild manure tea, use composted cow manure, not fresh manure. Put 1 part composted manure into a bucket with about 10 parts water and let it steep for several days. Stir it now and then. After that, strain or let the solids settle. Before applying, dilute the liquid again. Keep it weak, especially for young plants. Water it around the root zone on moist soil and avoid splashing it on leaves, flowers, or fruit. What does composted manure tea provide? Mainly nitrogen, with some phosphorus, potassium, and organic matter that supports soil life. Cucumbers often respond well to it, but because it can be strong, the key is dilution. Never put fresh manure right around young cucumber plants. It can damage tender roots because of salts and concentrated nitrogen. And with edible crops, fresh manure also brings a sanitation risk. Use composted material. Keep it diluted, and keep it off the edible parts of the plant. Now let's talk about a bonus one: yeast feeding. You may hear gardeners talk about feeding cucumbers with yeast, especially after a cold spell. I want to be honest about this. Yeast is not a complete fertilizer. It does not replace nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, compost, or good soil. It is more of an old-fashioned garden trick that some people use as a mild biological stimulant. Whether it helps depends on your soil temperature, your soil life, and the condition of the plant. If a cucumber has been sitting still after cool weather, some gardeners mix a yeast solution and use it once the soil has warmed up. A common recipe is fresh baker's yeast, a little sugar, and warm water, left to ferment for about a day. Then it is diluted heavily before watering. But I would not put yeast in the same category as real fertilizer. I would not use it often, and I would not rely on it as the main feeding. If the soil is cold, dry, compacted, or low in nutrients, yeast will not solve the real problem. Can you rotate different feedings? Yes, but do not pour everything on the plant just because you have it. For example, if your soil is not alkaline, you might start with a weak wood ash tea. A couple of weeks later, you might use a diluted weed tea or a very mild composted manure tea. After that, watch the plant. The mistake is feeding on autopilot. Cucumbers will show you a lot if you pay attention. If the plant is growing well, the leaves look healthy and flowers are coming, you do not need to keep pushing it with more and more fertilizer. If the leaves are pale, growth is weak, or the vine is not moving, then look at the whole situation. Is the soil warm enough? Is the bed too dry? Is it staying soggy? Are the roots stressed? Is the plant getting enough sun? Fertilizer is only one part of the answer. Now let's go over what not to do. First, do not use fresh manure. Fresh manure can burn young cucumber roots, especially if it is placed close to the stem or used in a strong liquid mix. It can also bring weed seeds and unwanted microbes into the garden. If you only have fresh manure, compost it first and let it break down properly before using it near vegetables. Second, do not overdo nitrogen. Cucumbers do need nitrogen. Without it, they will not grow strong leaves and vines. But too much nitrogen can push the plant into leafy growth instead of flowers and fruit. You get big green vines, lots of leaves, and very few cucumbers. So whether you are using blood meal, fish emulsion, compost tea, manure tea, urea, ammonium sulfate, or any store-bought vegetable fertilizer, follow the label and stay on the gentle side. Third, do not think stronger means better. 2 cups of ash instead of 1 is not better. A thicker manure tea is not better. Weed tea without dilution is not better. Young cucumber roots are sensitive, especially soon after transplanting. The golden rule is this: it is better to feed weekly and repeat later than to burn the roots once. Fourth, do not feed dry soil. Any liquid fertilizer should go onto moist soil. Water the bed first with plain water. Let it soak in a little, and then apply the feeding. That helps spread the nutrients more evenly and reduces the risk of root burn. Fifth, do not fertilize in the heat of the day. If it is 90 degrees outside and the sun is blasting the garden, wait. The plant is already stressed. Feed early in the morning or in the evening when the sun is lower and the soil is not baking hot. In hot climates, evening can be especially helpful, as long as you water the soil and not the leaves. Wet leaves overnight can encourage disease in humid areas, especially in the southeast and Midwest. Sixth, do not use ice-cold water. Cucumbers like warmth. Very cold water from a well or hose can slow the roots and add stress. Use water that has warmed a bit in the sun, or at least water that is not shockingly cold. So, what is the right way to give that first feeding? First, water the bed with plain water. You are not trying to flood it. Just make sure the soil is evenly moist. Second, mix your feeding weaker than you think you need. This matters a lot when the plants are young or have only recently started growing. Third, water around the root zone. Do not pour strong liquid fertilizer over the leaves and stem. Fourth, keep the amount moderate. For a small cucumber transplant, a couple of cups may be enough. For a larger, well-established plant, you can use closer to a quart around the root zone. Fifth, choose the right time. Early morning or evening is best. I like evening when the heat has dropped because the plant can take up moisture and nutrients overnight without fighting the sun. How do you know the feeding helped? Do not expect a miracle the next morning. Sometimes a plant perks up quickly just because the weather improves or the soil moisture finally gets right. But usually, you will see results over the next several days. New leaves begin to open more actively. The growing tip looks stronger. The vine starts moving. The tendrils look firm. The leaf color becomes more even. That is what you want to see. The plant is not just surviving anymore. It is growing. Let's bring it all together. The first feeding after transplanting cucumbers usually happens about 10 to 14 days after planting. But the plant matters more than the calendar. If you see new leaves, stronger growth, tendrils, or the beginning of a vine, the cucumber is probably ready. Good, gentle options include wood ash tea if your soil is not alkaline, diluted weed tea, mild compost tea, or a weak composted manure tea. Yeast is optional and should be treated as a folk method, not as real plant food. Do not use fresh manure. Do not overdo nitrogen. Do not feed dry soil. Do not fertilize during extreme heat. Do not use ice-cold water. Keep the first feeding mild, apply it to moist soil, and give it when the plant is actually ready. Do that, and your cucumber gets a good start instead of another round of stress. After that, success comes down to warm soil, steady watering, good airflow, and paying attention. Tell me in the comments what you usually use for the first cucumber feeding. Do you use compost tea, fish emulsion, a store-bought vegetable fertilizer, wood ash, or do you wait until the plants start flowering? And subscribe so you do not miss the next garden video.